All right. Welcome everyone to the third concurrent session of day one of the eighth annual University of Maryland Symposium on Environmental Justice and Health Disparities. And what a wonderful show it has been thus far. We are happy to virtually host you all today, and we are enthusiastic to learn more about the topic to be discussed during this session entitled Aclima and the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project Advancements in Hyperlocal Air Quality Monitoring and Environmental Policy. My name is Vivek Ravichandran, and I am a doctoral student at the University of Maryland School of Public Health, and I'll be the moderator for this session. I'm thrilled to be joined by our three panelists today, one of whom hopefully will be joining us shortly, starting with Miss Margaret Gordon. Miss Gordon was a founding member of the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project. She was a community representative on the California Goods Movement Action Plan Task Force and was recently featured in an ABC7 news piece entitled West Oakland Air Pollution Disproportionately Affects Black and Latino Residents. And this won a San Francisco and Northern California Chapter Emmy Award in the category of Environment and Science. Congratulations on those honors, Ms. Gordon, and what a wonderful honor it is to have you present on our panel today. We are also currently joined by Mr. Scott Andrews, who is the Director of Community Impact and Engagement at Aclima. Aclima currently serves the world's top public companies, in technology, energy, and finance, and currently operates the largest mobile sensor network on Earth, providing block-by-block resolution on greenhouse gases. Today, in conjunction and under the supervision of Miss Margaret Gordon, Mr. Scott Andrews, Miss Davida Herzl, who is the CEO and co-founder of Aclima, and Mr. Scott Andrews will be presenting a new data visualization tool through a demonstration. This will be one PowerPoint presentation and we'll follow up with a Q&A at the end. So again, really happy to have you three today. Let's start with a brief introduction. I know I already covered a lot of that already, but what sparked your interest in environmental justice and specifically with air quality monitoring? Miss Margaret, can we start with you?
Good. Well, it's still afternoon here. I don't know what it is back east. Okay. My name is Miss Margaret Gordon. I am a third generational West Oaklander. My family has always been involved in some social justice, something over before I was born. And my interest in air quality came about when I moved to West Oakland in 1992. And having a job at that time to do community after school programs. And I would go see the nurse at our local neighborhood elementary school, and there was a shoe boxes full of inhalers. Shoe boxes with the kids' names on it, baskets with the names on it. And I asked her why. She said, well, they all these children have asthma. And I said, well, I have asthma also. But I had never seen anything like that where there were so many children had asthma. So eventually, as I was doing my organizing for the after school program, we started getting notices about meetings around air quality. There was two meetings going on simultaneously. One about the Cypress Freeway. The freeway had failed in 1989, that air quality, and the new air quality to be more specific around health issues in West Oakland. So in between that time, we also developed the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project with the Pacific Institute, who was our fiduciary, and we had a coordinating team. And as they were helping us address these issues of air quality and other indicators, because they helped us wrote the first community participatory research document called Community Knowledge of Change. And that was over 20 years ago. And so by having our own data about who is being impacted, this is how I began my journey for the almost 30 years now with West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project. And all our work for campaigns, initiatives, planning, projects, policy making has to have research and data. We don't do, very rarely do we do anything without the research and data, and multiple levels of research and data. And also by doing that, we were able to start identifying, using words with environmental justice: proximity, land use, enforcement, criteria for equity, on and on. But those like the 4 things that, based in our work and having our own evidence, we were able to insert into the environmental justice process of thinking, and then also develop a methodology. How do we sit at a table to resolve, through problem solving on these issues? So that's like the beginning of our story. And also in 2008, 2010, we had got an invitation from Intel to do air monitoring, our own air monitoring, and giving us equipment called a dust track. And with that dust track, it detected PM 2.5 and 10. So we were able to start educating residents about what is the air they're breathing in West Oakland. So, and we didn't know when we started doing our own evidence, that was called citizen science. So that's how we have built this process of being engaging and participatory and community engagement, using the science of research and data to identify all these problems, and also having done this book, a report of indicators. So we have been able to identify a lot of things that relate to impacts and vulnerabilities within West Oakland.
Thank you, Ms. Gordon. And citizen science is a pillar of what we do at SEED. So it's really great to hear about your expertise and your experience in that matter, as well as your work. Thank you. Scott, let's move on to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ms. Margaret. So I'm also a 3rd generation Oaklander, but a couple generations behind Ms. Margaret, I think, and have always been very interested, like many people in my generation, thankfully, in issues around climate change, environmental health, and was working mostly in the climate space and the built environment for a number of years. And then I went to work for the Clinton Global Initiative, doing built environment and renewable energy work with them, and was introduced to people like Davida Herzl, our founder, and like Donnell Baird of Block Power, who are really pairing the climate discussion with the socioeconomic and environmental justice issues. And this is really this is what it's all about, if you ask me. And so I moved over to Aclima about 6.5 years ago now. It's been a while. Aclima as a company, which I'll get into a bit more in a minute here, has been around for over a decade. Most of that has been in the R&D phase of the company. We actually started doing indoor air quality monitoring, environmental sensing, but then moved over to the outdoor space, actually through a partnership with Google originally. And we're still working with Google and Google Street View. They're developing a program with us called AirView that uses their Street View cars to take measurements, more dense measurements than they would usually take when they're just driving around doing their normal Street View photo gathering. Those are really interesting, pairing us on their vehicles, driving around the entire world, really, taking snapshots of both photographic snapshots and then also air quality measurement snapshots all around the world, sometimes in places that have never really had any air quality monitoring whatsoever. But now they're developing this AirView program that works a bit more like what we do. But we're really happy to continue to partner with Google. But then we also do our own fleet management, which I'll also get into in a minute here. So I guess we can go ahead and start that presentation. Davida is going to try to join us. I know she was in a very important meeting this morning that may have run a bit long. So if she's not able to weigh in here, she definitely sends her regards and will probably join towards the end.
Definitely, and we can allow her to introduce herself at a later stage. And for those viewing this on YouTube, feel free to add any comments, and we'll try to keep this as discussion oriented as possible, so we can field questions from the chat as well as in the Q&A. All right, Scott, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thanks, Vivek. So we've already done the welcome. We're going to play a short video here that features Miss Margaret and Davida, actually, that kind of frames the issue specifically in West Oakland and in the Bay Area, where we've done a lot of our work and a lot of work with WOEIP and Miss Margaret and her co-director, Brian Beveridge. So you'll learn a bit more about that in the video. And then I'll tell you a bit more about Aclima and our model, and then show you this Bay Area-wide tool that we've created that we're calling Air.Health. And then Miss Margaret's going to give you a bit more detail about the West Oakland Environmental Indicators Project and their history. And then we can show you the overlap between what WOEIP is doing and how we're trying to support them the best we can with the data and analyses that we can offer. And then, one component of that is this Data Explorer tool that I'll show you a snapshot of, and then discuss a few next steps and how we can hopefully all work together on this stuff. So here is the video.
San Francisco, home to some of the world's most successful tech and finance companies. But not everyone who lives in the Bay Area enjoys the grand life of large paychecks and healthy living.
On the other side of the Bay Bridge behind me is the Port of Oakland. Air quality-wise, it might as well be 1,000,000 miles away.
This community called West Oakland, between the three freeways, the port area, and the Bay Bridge, has multiple businesses that relate to the trucks all in one neighborhood. And it's not just unique to West Oakland, it's all across the country where freeways is going to be placed for those who live in the suburbs to get into the city. That's part of the history. My name is Miss Margaret Gordon. Been in the Bay Area since 1971. I moved here, and ever since then, I've been involved in some kind of social justice.
Well, you can't actually see the air pollution she's fighting to reduce.
See what a yellow crane is? That is the alloy smelting company. Then we have several recycling companies.
It's impossible to miss the heavy industry that helps to produce it.
I'm looking at 2 new housing developments that may not even have indoor filtration. There's a farm and with a playground. To the left of these buildings is the smelting that goes 24/7 with trucks and melting metals.
West Oakland is in Alameda County in the East Bay, where people can expect to live an average of 80 years. That's better than the U.S. average of 78 years. But zoom into West Oakland itself, and living here can cut your time on the planet down to just 67 years. That's more in line with the kind of life expectancies this country hasn't seen since the 1940s. The hard truth is, all of these factories and ports are what create the modern life we all enjoy.
Where you live can really determine whether you live or die. And that has everything to do with where pollution sources are allowed to exist. There are millions and millions of people dying every year from breathing air that's been polluted by fossil fuels. In the United States, it's about 300,000 people every year.
When people say not in my backyard, it's got to be in somebody's backyard.
Yes, a backyard where people do not have power. That's how West Oakland and communities like West Oakland get dumped on.
We did a study and we found out that Black and brown communities in the Bay Area are exposed to 30% higher levels of pollution than the average. And white populations are experiencing 14% lower levels of pollution. My name is Davida Herzl and I'm CEO and co-founder of Aclima, and we're making air pollution and greenhouse gases visible.
How? Well, she's installed digital noses in the back seat of these cars. As they drive around, they sample San Francisco air, and then artificial intelligence comes in, creating a cutting-edge 3D map. The darker the color, the more smog creating pollution in the air. And in case you're wondering what West Oakland looks like, here it is. Now, for the first time, you can actually see where pollution spikes.
To have block by block data has made it a whole different perspective.
And so in most cities across the United States, you only have a few sensor stations per city. But air pollution is hyperlocal. So from one block to the next, it can differ by 800%.
Here at the Port of Oakland, those sensors have plenty to pick up on. All that smoke rolling off of diesel-powered ships at one of the top 10 largest shipping ports in the country, which are offloading cargo to those waiting and idling diesel-powered trucks.
In the United States, if you're Black, you are 3 times more likely to die from disease that is induced by air pollution. That is by design. That is based in historically discriminating practices in the United States.
1 out of 5 children between the ages of 0 and 5 end up in an emergency hospital.
Because of asthma?
Yes, asthma-related symptoms.
We took those findings to the International Maritime Organization, the UN's agency in charge of regulating shipping. And while they've done a lot to reduce sulfur dioxide, and ships in Oakland are now plugging into electric power once they dock, the agency admits electric ships that can actually cross the ocean and long-haul electric trucks are still in the future. These mobile monitors are here today. And by catching a ride on those Google Maps Street View cars, they're letting today's city planners see the invisible threat for the first time. In West Oakland, that's forcing some change.
There's a new generation of policymakers and leaders taking action in a way that historically, hasn't really happened before. People like Miss Margaret, the wave of people that really care about the nexus between climate and air pollution and environmental justice. It's inspiring to see what's happening right now.
A couple things that we have done within West Oakland, or the city of Oakland, we have a truck route. Trucks are prohibited from some streets.
The families on those streets, people who once felt as invisible as pollution, are now having a long-awaited I told you so moment, possibly clearing the air for future generations. In West Oakland, California, Dave Malkoff, The Weather Channel.
I'm the reporter from that story you just watched. Since you're still here at the end of the video,
Okay. Well, thank you all. And I'm sure a lot of that you all know about too well already, but just wanted to, show some images and frame the conversation here and a bit about the work we're doing specifically around trucking and shipping in West Oakland. So a bit more about Aclima. So as I mentioned, we've been around for quite some time now, honing our process, which we think is an entirely new way to diagnose the health of our air and climate changing pollution. So we measure greenhouse gases and criteria pollutants, as well as methane and ethane for natural gas leak detection. And we do this through a network of sensors, mostly mobile-based, but also we do stationary as well. We then developed the software and analytics tools, really from end to end, from data ingestion, all of the calibration, all the data management, QA/QC process, and then ultimately serving up these data to our users in several different tools, which I'll get into a bit in this presentation. One is geared more towards professional users, regulators, the research community, experts, which we call Aclima Pro, and then several different public-facing tools, which are a bit more user-friendly for those who maybe don't have a background in statistical analyses and geospatial tools. And we've built these tools with community partners and local experts like Ms. Margaret, and we really couldn't be here without her today, because she's really taught us so much about what's important to the type of work that she does and what could be valuable to that type of work. So the main thing, though, for us really is to be grounded in science. We're constantly working with the research community, with regulators like the California Air Resources Board, the South Coast Air Quality Management District, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. We're now working with the Department of Environmental Conservation in New York State, which I'll talk a bit more about later, and the US EPA, of course. We have a cooperative research and development agreement with the EPA, as well as some other work. And then we have an advisory board of experts from a number of different aspects of this field, from environmental justice leaders like Ms. Margaret and Peggy Shepard, and of course, Sakobi Wilson. Really thankful to have his help and input in making sure that what we're creating is as useful as possible to both the EJ community and then also the researchers and other stakeholders who are helping them out. So shout out to all of them, and thank you all for your help. And as I mentioned, we really have now the largest street level mapping fleet in the world. We have, I'm not sure what the exact number is at the moment, but dozens and dozens of vehicles out in the world now that are driven 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, by full-time drivers. And here are some of those full-time drivers. We really pride ourselves on hiring from the communities where we're working and paying a good living wage, full benefits, and then offering opportunities for advancement. We've had a number of people who start as drivers, kind of as a base level within our organization, essentially, but who've been promoted up to fleet managers, tech ops professionals, even data scientists. We have a couple of former drivers who are doing data science work for us now, so that's really cool. And we're actually working with Donnell Baird and others to help us hire in these communities. Like if we go into a new geography where we might not have boots on the ground yet, we're working with local groups. And anytime we expand to a new geography, I hope that myself and my colleagues can work with some of you to connect with the groups and maybe if there's any job training groups that you all work with, we would love to work with you to hire locally as well. And so ultimately what we're looking to do here is create tools that help communities reduce their exposure to emissions. A good example would be this Owning Our Air plan, which Ms. Margaret will talk a bit more about in her section here. But essentially, we want our data and data products to help people on the ground develop emissions reductions plans, identify issues. I mean, oftentimes those issues are somewhat obvious, but sometimes, having that data validation is really necessary to take it to the next level, to get the resources needed, and the funding, and really to prioritize specific interventions above others, or just allow for specific interventions to actually get the attention that they deserve. Here in the Bay Area, as you can see by this map, this is actually a map of measurements that we've taken. We've been working now for a number of years with WOEIP, but we've now been monitoring constantly here in the Bay Area since late 2019 across all 9 counties of the Bay Area. That's 101 cities. And during this time, we've seen a lot of different things impact the data that we're collecting, including some really large wildfire events. Obviously, the shutdown really had some interesting impacts on the baseline data that we're collecting, and then it really taught us a lot about how to design our drive patterns and our data collection in a way that can really get us to different, to the best possible outcomes for our users from a data QA QC standpoint for these baseline data sets that we're collecting that allow year over year comparisons, while also still allowing a level of granularity for our users to really dig into what might be causing the types of pollution and exposure that they might be experiencing in their neighborhoods, and that can be by parsing data by time of day and day of week to get to things like traffic impacts during rush hour, or if that a specific business tends to operate at a certain time of day or days of week, we can actually parse out that type of data. And then we're also adding some new capabilities to our network. We've been doing TVOCs for a while now, but we're adding some more speciated toxics capabilities like BTEX, where if we're identifying consistent hotspots with our TVOC sensors, then we can go in with these more expensive devices and do some validation there. We're working with DEC and others on that right now as well. And then black carbon, also one of those devices that maybe is a little more costly, and but also really important. So we're including black carbon now in all of our in every campaign that we do. So I'll show you now an example of a public-facing tool that we created for the Bay Area. And this is in addition to that Aclima Pro software that I explained earlier a little bit. But I'll just do a quick walk through this because I know I'm already talking too much here. Okay, so here we have the landing page for this tool we're calling Air.Health, and this shows all 9 counties of the Bay Area, 101 cities. The landing page here kind of explains users what they're looking at.
Oh, Scott, sorry, don't mean to interrupt, but I don't think we can see that particular screen.
Or you can you not see it yet?
It might be a little bit slow on my end.
Let me turn off my camera. Yeah, I think I need to turn off my camera.
It's up.
Free up some bandwidth. Is it up now?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, great. Yes, thank you. Okay, so here's the landing page, which allows you to either jump to a specific location if you know where it is that you're interested in. We have some examples here that also give you a little bit of background on the pollutants that might be of the most interest to our users. Nitrogen dioxide, obviously, PM 2.5, CO2, primary greenhouse gas. You can either jump into the region-wide tool, or you can continue to learn a bit more about the background here. If you scroll down, that includes a lot of detail about our methodology. So you have links to some scientific papers that are of relevance to this specific type of data collection and what users see when they explore this tool. And then we also have English and Spanish, so we can easily translate this to languages as needed, depending on where the tool is. But I'll just first jump to WOEIP's office, actually. This is an example here. So this takes you directly to a specific location, and it shows you the road segments around that location. And you can toggle here to different pollutants. So there on Mandela Parkway, we're seeing fine particulate matter, PM 2.5. Over this 1 year period, the average was 8.6 micrograms per cubic meter. And that was taken as an average of multiple passes. I'm not sure exactly how many passes on this particular road segment, but the minimum is 20, but it's often way more than 20. And that's spread out as evenly as possible over time of day and day of week. So as I mentioned before, we're measuring 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so we try to spread those measurements out as evenly as possible so that you're getting a true baseline figure here. You can put it on satellite view if you want. So you see down here the rail yard very close to their office. And then you can zoom out to get a big picture view of all of Alameda County. The reason that we've done these hex bins, and each one of these hex bins, hexagons, is the average of all of the road segments within that approximate quarter square mile hexagon. And so that really allows you to get a good big picture view. But then you can zoom in, of course, by road segment if you want to get more granular. You can click over here to Contra Costa County. Just going a bit slow because of everything I've got going on my computer right now. I apologize. But you can also look at the street view, which we think is a really cool feature, and people have liked that a lot. Go back to the main page here. Show you San Francisco here. And so this is down in kind of the Tenderloin in San Francisco. So pretty high nitrogen dioxide levels, PM 2.5. We include the WHO and EPA annual kind of recommended thresholds. They're not necessarily exactly applicable here, and it's not an apples to apples comparison because, of course, we're taking averages over an entire year, but they just give our users a little bit of a framing here. So anybody can use this tool, Air.Health. We're developing similar types of maps and mapping tools for other areas we're mapping right now. But for now, the Bay Area is the largest data set we've got. Sam, if we could get back to the main screen, thank you. Okay, so Miss Margaret, sorry I talked too long, but now it's your turn to tell us a bit more about WOEIP.
Okay, well, hello everyone. Like I said earlier in my introduction, West Oakland Environmental Indicators was developed based on a small grant that we received in 1997-96 to orientate and educate residents about the use of how do you measure things and measure things that impact or make you vulnerable. So our story is that we took 2 years as residents who was residents, which we had PhD candidates and master students who helped facilitate the process, who all had backgrounds either in environment, health, engineering, to give us this new information about impacts and problem solving by having this information. And we, from that process, we had who was the students were from the UC Berkeley School of Urban and Regional Development, and along with Pacific Institute. How we have utilized the data and been able to take that process and develop the organization, which has been in existence now almost 30 years. But as an update to West Oakland, now we have had, now with the refined data that we have from Aclima and other such researchers. Next slide. First of all, with having the information from Aclima and also support refining the data with Environmental Defense Fund, we have been able to be the first community in in the state of California where AB 617 got off the ground. Because we had done so much air monitoring for over 10, 12 years that we went straight into an action plan. And our action plan is called Owning Our Own Air. And this also includes having partnership agreements with our Bay Area Air Quality Management Air Districts. And we meet once a month. We have a steering committee who steers the process. We have a co-lead committee who also helps the steering committee to put the agenda together. And we also have a neutral facilitator to help us to navigate through all these different governance and processes. Next slide. So here is some of us a summary about the items that we are pursuing as part of reducing emissions in West Oakland. Next slide.
Ms. Margaret, can you talk for 1 second about the identification of the impact zones, actually?
Identification of the impact zones was based on how high the pollution was per block or per area. And so if you see these circles, those are identified parcels of land and city blocks was the highest level of pollution from the Google card. Mm-hmm. And I think, let me step back one. In West Oakland, we have two regulatory air monitors, and both of those are high in the air, about 3 or 4, maybe 6 stories up. And one of the things that we had never had based on these impact zones is having air quality information that was from the street to the sidewalk inside our homes. That makes a whole nother level of the discussion when you have that refined data block by block, and also you identify where the hot spots are and also the impact zones. Next slide. As you see, we have the strategies that we have developed is about 89, and we have about, as of right now, we are in a place where we have ad hoc committees to look at various strategies have now turned into projects for implementation. And we have been asked by the city of Oakland, based on all this work, to also participate in the general plan. And the state of California, the new general plans is also including environmental justice, and which is something we have never done before. Next slide.
So Ms. Margaret, for that general plan update, are you actually advising them to take a look at some of those 89 strategies, or
Yes,
or is that outside the scope of the general plan?
there's no, some of the city has adopted on its own, took our work and made priorities on some of the strategies that had to do with air quality, land use, hazardous areas, that they have identified those things they want to invest in, or they want to get more research on, and relationships and relationships to the impacts of West Oakland. Yeah. So yes, they have asked us to partner with them and bring our resources, our researchers to the table to be more supporting of these elements of the general plan.
Yeah. As well as things like this bike path, right? The MTC, what do they call it? The Bay Length Bay Path.
Bay Length, and
we
have a deep conversation about this trail. This trail that the Metropolitan Transportation Commission wants to have in West Oakland, and from West Oakland over to Treasure Island. And what we are concerned about is what is the exposure risk and risk and exposure for recreational use of a bike, walking, or having mobility issues, trying to go across, follow this trail all the way over to on the Bay Bridge at that also, and all the way into the Treasure Island. So we have been doing research on the traffic related air pollution, and we are finding out that this is a real thing. But and what is the thing? If some of these projects, how do you mitigate? What is the mitigation for such a project? Because we know that area where they want to use for this link or this trail is highly polluted, because you have to cross the freeway into the port area to get to the trail that leads to Treasure Island. Yeah. And all that is all that area is either from pollution from trucks and cars, ships and trains in one area that people will be exposed to. Yeah. For trying to get, and the freeway, to try to get it to do this walkable, bikeable, recreational trail.
Yeah. Now, is that also the area where they're talking about moving some of the industrial facilities out of the residential part of West Oakland?
There are two recyclers, which you saw one of them in the video. Snitzer, CAS, Custom Alloy Smelting Cells, out of the neighborhood, and the California Waste Solution out of the neighborhood, and it has taken us 20 plus years to just get those facilities into a planning process with the city, and those are right up next to where they want to do this Bay Trail. Next slide.
I think our next one, I was going to talk a little bit more about that tool that we showed you just the other day, where we're trying to help with this one particular element of the City of Oakland's general plan update. And so Miss Margaret and our good friend and colleague at EDF, Fern, are working on advising the city on this, on the housing element for the general plan update. And so we put together a simple kind of geospatial tool here where we take specific data layers of data that we've collected. In this case, this example here is our annual NO2 baseline for West Oakland. And then overlay that with things like existing residential parcels, and then the proposed new low to moderate income housing, and just seeing, if those locations make sense from an ambient air quality standpoint, and if they are in areas that seem like they will be experiencing a disproportionate level of exposure, then the city needs to make sure that those buildings have the adequate filtration and protections in place for the residents. So clearly, it's going to be a while before all vehicles are, electrified. And we have a major housing crisis right now in the Bay Area. But by taking this type of hyperlocal data into account, you can really at least build smarter until we're at a better place of better, equality across the board in the Bay Area in terms of our air quality exposure. And then another thing that we're doing here with this tool and within Aclima Pro is adding things like climate and economic justice indicators. We can pull these from a number of different sources, as was talked about earlier by people like Tai Lung. The CalEnviro screen is a pretty good tool for this, and so overlaying these different socioeconomic and health indicators with our data, I think can be really helpful. Unfortunately, the resolution of a lot of these data sets is not exactly where it needs to be, because this type of data is really hard to collect and people move around, and obviously there's a lot of privacy issues. And so having our data plus people like Miss Margaret and her group, who really have the feet on the street and the local knowledge, can really help to better strategically place things like low-income housing in these neighborhoods.
One of the things, add on to what Scott just said, we are such a mix. The word mix means a lot of different things. You've got industrial-based polluting businesses up next to where people live. And this has been allowed by the city for my 25 plus years of doing this work. They continuously, because most of the land is land that's available for affordable housing is either next to some kind of industrial, mobile, or stationary source, or right up next to the freeway, which doesn't make any sense. Yep. And that needs to be really addressed in such a way. What is the mitigation planning from the general plan and other developments? How you're not going to do harm to a resident?
Yeah, it seems like West Oakland also has some really interesting problems right now in terms of getting resources because of the rapid gentrification that's going on there. So using, economic indicators at the census block or census tract level even cannot necessarily be all that accurate. Are you finding that to be the case, Ms. Margaret?
Yes, I am, because of new people have moved in. One of the problems with the zip codes and census tract, you show a higher income of people, and that's not true. From a modeling piece, just doing modeling, that does not support the who is poor, who is underserved, who is having health issues, who have children that end up back and forth to the emergency for respiratory problems or asthma. So it's not, so the software for modeling does not give a true picture. It identifies the parcels, but they don't identify what is next to that parcel, or what is down the street from that parcel. That's what we need. That's why feet on the street and looking at what's happening from the sidewalk, from the street to the sidewalks to in people's houses, which is not very coherent, have been customized in such a place, whereas that the city is really pushing robustly that this housing has to have mitigations attached to it. That's one of the problems.
Yeah, and in a very similar sense, like we see air quality, particularly for things like PM 2.5, really being vastly different, up to 800 times by, from block to block, depending upon, the proximity to different, industrial activities or a truck route or, a place where, vehicles tend to idle a lot. So just like having a multi-million-dollar home next to, some low-income housing, or maybe a home that was built 100 years ago that has very poor ventilation, or a building envelope that's really leaky, the levels of exposure can be very, very different, from one building to the next. So some upcoming events and how we can kind of continue this conversation and hopefully expand to new areas. So as I mentioned before, we just launched in New York State with the Department of Environmental Conservation through their really great Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. But we've now started collecting data in 4 communities, and we're going to be adding 6 more this fall. That's everywhere from the Bronx, Long Island, up to Rochester and Northern Manhattan, Niagara, Buffalo. We're going all across the state, but they're disadvantaged communities that have been identified by DEC through public comments and the Climate Justice Working Group. So really excited to be launching in New York State. There's going to be this Air and Waste Management Association conference that's going to talk a lot about freight and ports that are very, obviously very relevant to a lot of EJ communities around the country, particularly places like West Oakland. So definitely tune into that if you're able. Ms. Margaret, I believe, is going to speak at this Health Effects Institute workshop in October. So reach out for more information on that. You can either contact me or info@woeip.org. And then we are working with some of our funders on what we're calling the Ground Truth Fund to provide capacity building grants to community-based organizations, because we know that this new type of data collection and analysis is it's complicated. I mean, we've got, I think, almost half of our science and engineering team are PhDs, maybe more than half actually. And, I have a master's degree and I don't understand half of this stuff. And so there's just a lot of knowledge sharing and sharing of best practices when it comes to applying these new tools and data sets. So really excited to get that off the ground and start expanding conversations here. So here's our contact info if you want to reach out after this. And I think we have some time for Q&A and discussion. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Margaret, for a very informative presentation and demo. So we will hop right into the Q&A, and we have a question in the chat from Jaron Burke, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, an environmental health manager at WEACT. So how have you implemented engaged community members throughout the process in both of your work? and what has worked and what are some challenges. I know, Margaret, you talked about the collaborative problem solving model, our CPS model. So did you both want to speak on that? Why don't we start with you, Margaret, since you did have that slide.
Excuse me, young man. My name is Miss Margaret. I'm 75
Miss
years
Margaret.
old.
Miss
Okay.
Margaret.
Okay. Just put a handle to that. All right. What we have done constantly is that we have briefings on the data to make sure that, especially the people from the steering committee and AB 617 and the audience have this information, and that and that's been working very well. And what has been working is that having a core group or a cohort of people to get on the street. That is a missing piece here. And how do you fund that?
Yeah.
Right. Scott?
Yeah. It's a tough thing for for us because we really care about these issues a lot. I mean, that's why we're all working in this field, and we're a very mission-driven company. We're a public benefit corporation, but at the end of the day, we are still a company and have to have funding in order to pay our drivers to go out and collect this data, and to buy the equipment that it takes to go out and collect the data, and hire data scientists that could be making way more money if they went and sold advertising for Facebook or something. So the community engagement part, I think, it's the most important thing that we do, because that's ultimately who's going to use and benefit from, we hope, the data that we're collecting. But it's always tough when we move into a new place, because I do the best I can, and people on my team do the best that we can to learn about the local issues and learn who the players are and what the history is there, and like the historical trauma that many community members have experienced over decades of neglect or active hostility from local lawmakers in some cases, and landowners and developers. And so we recognize that there's a lot of distrust out there, and yes, we are essentially a technology company from California, which we know is not always the best look, but we really try to be as diligent and respectful and committed as possible. I mean, with the number of hours in the day, unfortunately, is limited. But if it were up to me, I would be, spending all of my time working on the issues in West Oakland, or alternatively, all of my time working on the issues, in the South Bronx. But unfortunately, we can't always do that. So having these community and partnerships is so important. And that's why we've started this thing like the Ground Truth Fund that actually compensates people for their time, because, it's obviously not fair that people who live in these communities have to spend their time and precious energy, working on just having clean air to breathe, when people in other neighborhoods don't have to give it a second thought and can use that time to, go out and make money or have fun or do whatever it is that they want to do, as opposed to what they have to do just to survive. So I know that's a very long-winded and not very direct answer there, Jaron, but I would say that we just are trying to work with everybody as much as possible, and recognize that, we're just one tool out of many different tools that need to be applied to this process. We absolutely support and value like citizen science campaigns, things like purple airs or air beams. If groups are going out and collecting their own data, we want overlay our data with their data and really have it be part of, all part of the same process and part of the same effort here. We're not trying to replace the work that anybody else is doing. We just want to augment it because, because we spent a long time and like have some really smart people working on this stuff. And I think that the data that they're collecting and the way that we're going about working with regulators, I think will hopefully go a long way in getting this type of data to actually be used for policymaking, as opposed to just kind of being an interesting sort of like, oh, look what we saw out there. Our ultimate goal is to have our data be trusted by regulators and by decision makers, so that it can actually be applied to things like zoning or approving new businesses or not approving new businesses in neighborhoods, things like that.
One of the things that we also do is that we do a lot of mass emails out, because I've been in West Oakland since 1992, so I have a lot of relationships and trust because of the work that I have done here. So we do a lot of mass information out to people in West Oakland. Then we also have our Facebook that we send out to, and then we also do presentations at the different organizations that have a different interest in West Oakland also.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are just an absolute, model for this type of work, and it's just so cool going to the meetings that y'all put together in West Oakland, just to see the range of people who get involved. I mean, everyone from the local trucking community to Caltrans to concerned parents. Like it's just it really takes a village, and WOEIP is leading that village. It's really cool.
Thank you both for a very descriptive answer to that question. We have a lot of praise from others in the chat for you, Miss Margaret. So thank you so much for your work that you've done in West Oakland over the years. There is a question about for Aclima for you, Mr. Andrews. Do you intend to spread your data collection to all of California, including the region of Southern California?
Yeah, I mean, we would absolutely love to cover all of California, and we have done some collection in a few different neighborhoods and cities in Southern California, including East LA, Boyle Heights, West Commerce, which is one of the AB 617 communities down there, San Bernardino, Muscoy as well. We're helping this the development of this Bassett Avocado Heights Advanced Energy Community, which is a really cool program in the San Gabriel Valley, and then San Diego as well. And we're definitely in active discussions with like the South Coast Air Quality Management District to expand the work that we've done with them to date, as well as the California Air Resources Board. So yes, I mean, we want to be everywhere, and we're working on it for sure.
You already have, I'm assuming, millions of data points. So further enhancing that data set to encompass more blocks. As mentioned, the 800% difference in particulate matter at the block by block level is alarming. So glad to see that initiative being undertaken. This kind of goes into the next question. Can this technology from Aclima be used by community groups in other areas within citizen science efforts? And can the technology be shipped to them, and can it be shipped back?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something that we're working on right now. We haven't done that in the past because our devices are so complicated, and that's not, it doesn't mean that we don't think somebody else could figure it out. It's just a matter of setting it up and monitoring it on a daily basis, which our drivers are trained to do. But we're working on some additional devices that would be more of kind of like a plug and play, like a solar powered device that maybe doesn't measure all of the pollutants, but measures the ones, 1 or 2 or 3 that are of particular relevance to that region and can be a lot easier and could be either mobile or stationary based. So so definitely reach out and let me know, Garrett, what it is that could be of use to you, and we'll see what we can do in the months ahead here.
Well, you also, the responsibility for, who has the responsibility for taking the data and shaping and framing it into community-led processes is the community itself. Y'all should be inviting Aclima and any other type of group like that to sit down and walk through a process of, I call it pre-work, if you're going to have a project, to do a partner agreement. Having partner agreements really spell out roles, tasks, funding, conflict resolution, and that is the one of the key pieces that makes this work. And having the knowledge of the knowledge that Aclima is presenting for the presenting, and how do you develop the places and spaces for the messaging, spaces and spacing for identifying the health impacts and vulnerabilities, and also how do you interface with agencies using this data. But that is the role of the community. Whoever is being community-led, that's your role, to be on top of that.
Thank you, Ms. Margaret, for that. That kind of goes into another question that I had. I don't see any other questions right now in the chat. So we have one right here. So in 2020, the Government Accountability Office stated that federal funding for air quality monitoring requires a 40% match for states and localities. This could be cost prohibitive, for many states that have EJ challenges. So what can be done to sort of resolve this situation? And are there initiatives in place to incentivize such air quality endeavors in the communities that need them the most?
Okay, but that's the part about having real orientation on how to navigate these systems. How do you partner with, how do you include academia or a research company or a consultant to be supportive of what you're trying to find? Because it's all about where you're going to drill down and who is doing the coordination and collaboration. So it's about a practice. It's really about a practice that has to be intentional to be able to do that with agencies or without government. Sometimes you have to start off with be a head of government until they have RFPs or a program, a project out there of doing something and related to air, water, and soil. You have to be very vigilant and looking at how do you utilize the opportunity to make opportunity to be at the table, not just being at the table, but at the head of the table, based on your expertise and your experiences. And how do you utilize, also do partnerships with NGOs? Sometimes you may have an NGO that needs to be restructured or reformed to be more community engaging. That you have to take that opportunity. You have to make those opportunities for yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Margaret, one thing that's always really impressed me about the way that you and Brian work there at WOEIP is like you really are playing the long game. And I mean, in some of these meetings, like depending upon who's in the room, it can be so infuriating to like hear how tone deaf, like, maybe a developer or, a trucking company or something might be, but not just getting pissed off, but really like coming and trying to be as engaged and empathetic as possible about like where it is that they're coming from and what they may or may not know about your experience and your lived experience and what your community is experiencing. And that's and then if you can come to that table also with data to back it up, then that's, you know, that's the golden ticket there, I think. So
just read in the chat and I see some very fascinating stuff from Garrett Fitzgerald, who mentions that they just did a county scale heat mapping event this weekend where 600 community members volunteered to drive around to map temperature and humidity. So it's not just air quality, it's humidity, it's other meteorological factors.
Right.
So
that's great.
yeah.
We're actually we do humidity because it has an impact on a lot of the other pollutants that we measure, but temperature's been it's been something that has been like we've kind of been missing for a little while here, but we are in the process of adding that as well for heat island effect. It's not necessarily as important in a lot of the communities that we've been driving so far, like in the Bay Area in particular. Like heat island is a problem, but nothing like some other parts of the world, like in Maryland. So that's great to hear that you're doing that, and that's the type of data set we would love to like overlay with our data to see how they how they may coincide.
It does seem to be another research firm, so I guess there's the opportunity for collaboration and bi-directional flow of shared knowledge and expertise, resources. All right.
And one other thing about the funding, like that 40% match and just, you know, the overall cost of this is the model that we've found to be the best is having like a data subscription model so that we can help offset the cost of that data collection and analysis and data storage and, you know, all of that, all the back end work that goes into that, you know, making that data available. And so we're offsetting the cost of data collection by contracting with like utilities for natural gas leak detection, which obviously is can be a very huge safety risk if there's a big natural gas leak. But then, you know, with all these tiny leaks and like the death by 1,000 cuts that we're experiencing as a climate right now, you know, those are also huge on the in terms of the climate impacts. And so if we can get utilities to subscribe to like our methane leak, you know, services, then that really offsets the cost for like environmental justice groups to access our data and researchers.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. So we have about 7 minutes left, so we can take a couple more questions if there are any at this time. But I did have another one just in case the questions have been exhausted from the chat, and that is how badly does your air monitoring sort of undermine the reliability of the system that the EPA currently has in place? And what infrastructure should the EPA utilize to avoid the misclassification of air monitoring, especially in marginalized communities that are located 10, 20 miles away from government monitors?
Well, first of all, you know what they need to do? Stop doing is being partnering with those communities. Those regional offices of EPA, US EPA should be having staff inside the EJ office or the air quality office working directly with those impacted communities. There should be nothing else in the pipe until you build those relationships. And also exhibit how you can use other sensors to detect there's all kinds of cheap sensors out there now that you can use to detect the air quality outside of people's houses. But if you don't have a plan of action, or create the space for a plan of action, you don't know until you know better. And that's part of the problem here. Get out of your desk, out of your cubicle, and get where the community is. Yeah. And listen to the community. What are their concerns and issues? And that's a starting place of a much better relationship overall if they really see the need to be intentional.
Right.
That's the problem. Having people don't they just there to be there. No, we need you to be there because you have some there to support us and advocating and make these changes and having the measurements of what is harming this community.
Thank you for that. And we do have officials from various government agencies like the EPA present at the symposium, either today and or tomorrow, as well as during the in-person sessions on day 3. So I think this is a great conversation to have at a round table as well. And I would love to hear more about that.
I'll give you a good example.
Mm-hmm.
2005, about 2005, 2006. We got a small grant from the Bay Area Air District to do a truck survey count of how many trucks was coming, the type of trucks, the type of vehicles that came in and out of the port area. So we developed our own system of this to count these trucks throughout West Oakland. So we had specified sites that we had 3 people at a corner where we knew there was high traffic. One took a picture, somebody scribed, and somebody watched out for anything else. But you have to have some innovation and creation to be able to support that. And who is also part of our team of supporting this? It was that the Air District engineers came out and took over one of these that was part of a team of this site. That also creates a more refined process of everybody knowing about the information that you might not have. So you have to be think out the box sometime, and in order to be able to create that opportunity, that should be opportunity to be more supporting of each other, if that's what the agency really wants to do as part of releasing, reviving, and building relationships with these communities.
Thank you for those words of wisdom, Miss Margaret. We have a couple minutes left, so I will jump to the last. This will be the last question that we'll take. This is a site-specific question, so I'm not a Cali or Oakland native, but it states if there are any interesting concentrations of data around, this is the OUSD school sites.
Oakland Unified School District.
Oh, okay. School districts in West Oakland, such as Prescott Elementary School or McClymonds High School, Hoover, etc. So I will let you
look at. We go to the Aclima. You go to either the EDF website or the Aclima website, and if you put the name there, you can see directly what are the impacts of these sites of these around the schools, around these particular schools. I live at Prescott. I live 2 blocks from Prescott, and so all that there's plenty of data to say why that there's an impact. And one of the things for Prescott, because of the data that we had, we were able to support them through IQ Air to get indoor filtration into the school. That is what's the most important thing. If you're going to be looking at the data, how do you utilize the data to improve the air quality indoors?
Right.
Because the kids spend more time indoors than they do outdoors. Then also, how do you use the data to support housing? The housing, especially income-based housing, housing authority housing. How do you support using that data for indoor filtration?
Thank you again, Ms. Margaret, and thank you, Mr. Andrews. It's a little unfortunate we couldn't have Davida here today, but I'm sure the audience can attest this. We learned a great deal from this presentation, and we have a wonderful close-in plenary that I encourage everyone to attend in about 10 minutes. So once again, thank you, panelists, and thank you, everyone watching on YouTube for contributing to this wonderful conversation.
Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you, Ms. Margaret, for more words of wisdom, and Vivek.
Thank you.
I